There's not a question in my mind that this is perhaps one of the most significant moments in the history of our church. And I look around this room and I see all of you sitting out there, and I think I have an understanding of what Mordecai was thinking when he was counseling Esther in her decision-making process, because she was about to make a decision that would be the most important decision that she had ever made in the course of her life. I don't know how familiar you are with the Old Testament story of Esther, but it's quite a story. We're not going to read the whole story. In fact, we're really going to focus on one verse out of that story today. But I got to tell you that the story leading up to that verse is quite a story. One of the principal actors in the beginning of the book of Esther is a king named Ahasuerus. And I'm just going to tell you, to say that King Ahasuerus was full of himself is an understatement. The story begins with a party that King Ahasuerus threw. It was a party that lasted 180 days. How many of you have ever been a part of a 180-day long party? I'm sure you haven't. Can you imagine what that must have been? 180 days of partying with people from all over his realm that came to witness the grandeur and the wealth that he wanted to shower upon them. And then on the 180th day of that 180-day party, he decided to throw another party for the people who lived in Susa. And this was a 7-day long affair. So then on the 7th day of that party, which means there's been 187 days of partying going on, King Ahasuerus decided that he wanted to bring before the people who were there his beautiful wife, Queen Vashti. And he wanted everybody to marvel at how beautiful his wife was. Now the only problem was that after spending 187 days of drinking it up with the wealthy and influential leaders from across his kingdom, he hadn't even given so much as a glance to his wife. And so I'm guessing, some of you wives in here, see if you would have differed. I'm guessing that after 187 days of partying going on, where he hadn't even given her the time of day, I'm guessing that she didn't want to have anything to do with her pompous partying husband and all his rowdy friends. Would any of you have differed with her? So guess what? She didn't show up. And so then King Ahasuerus decided that he needed to get some advice as to how to respond to her insubordination. So he called together some of his legal experts and asked them, what do I need to do about this? And so they counseled him to establish a royal edict that threw her out of being queen. Just get rid of her, they said. So he did. Now, I want to offer just a little, some free advice here. Men or women, I'll suggest this to everyone. Don't ever seek marriage-related advice, or any advice for that matter, from a group of people you've been partying with for 187 days. But that's another sermon for another day. But I do think that's important to know. Now, from this point forward, the story moves fairly quickly. The king wakes up one morning after some time has passed, and he decides that he's missing his wife, who he had so quickly dismissed. And so this guy was pretty boneheaded, I think. He called his advisors together again and said, what should I do? And so they cooked up a plan. They said, hey, let's have a Miss Persia contest. And let's invite all of the never-before married young women in the land to come before you. And you can be the judge, King Ahasuerus. And the woman you pick will be the next queen. And he agreed to that nonsense. Now, it just so happens that in the city of Susa, there was a Jewish woman, a young Jewish woman. Her name was Esther. And Esther was an orphan, but she was the niece of a wise man named Mordecai. And Mordecai had taken care of her after her parents died. And Mordecai had a hunch that because of Esther's beauty, she would win that contest hands down. The only problem was he knew that if King Ahasuerus found out that she was of Jewish origin, that she wouldn't stand a chance. And so Mordecai counseled Esther to hide her Jewish identity from anybody in the royal court, which she did. Well, it came time for her to be presented before the king. And I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was love at first sight or passion at first glance, but Esther won the contest and she became queen. And all of a sudden, she finds herself living in the lap of luxury. And Mordecai, her uncle, was always sort of hanging around outside the royal palace just so he could keep tabs on what was going on with his niece, who had now become the queen. In fact, Mordecai would eventually become one of those people that was considered a servant of the king, who hung out at the king's gate. But I'll get to that here in just a minute. I have to tell you this, though. Every good story has a villain, right? And in this particular story about Esther, the villain is a Jewish-hating man named Haman. And King A had promoted Haman to become his right-hand person. And in fact, if you think that King Ahasuerus had an ego, he didn't have anything compared to the ego Haman had. There was even an edict that went out that required everybody in the court and everybody who served the king to bow down to Haman whenever he walked by. And that's what people did. Everybody, that is, except Mordecai. Because you see, Mordecai, because of his relationship with God, would never consider bowing down to Haman. He would never consider bowing down to anybody but God. And that just got all over Haman. In fact, he despised Mordecai, so much so that Haman eventually convinced King A to establish a decree that would lead to the extermination of every Jewish person in the land, all because Mordecai wouldn't bow down to Haman. Which brings us to Esther's epic moment of decision. You see, it turns out that Esther alone had the power and the influence to sabotage Haman's plan, but her undoing his plan would cause her to risk her very life. Because you see, it was widely known throughout the kingdom that if anybody ever came before King Ahasuerus without first being summoned, they would risk the death penalty. So she knew that was what she faced if she were to go before him unannounced. But I'll tell you, in order to save the Jewish people from genocide, she was going to have to do just that. She was going to have to risk her very life to go before the king. And Mordecai knew that she was struggling with this. She was struggling with whether she should do this or not. And so Mordecai sent her a message. It's the message we're going to look at in chapter 4, verse 14 of the book of Esther. And this message essentially told Esther that the future of her people depended upon her taking a huge leap of faith. And the consequence of her inaction would be that her people would die. So Mordecai said to her this. He said, if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will come to the Jewish people from another place, but you and your father's family will be destroyed. Who knows, he said. Perhaps you've come to your royal position for such a time as this. Well, as the story goes, she took that leap of faith, and the Jewish people were saved. And Mordecai turned out to be absolutely correct. God had placed Esther in her royal position for such a time as this. And her decision to take that leap of faith on behalf of her people rescued them from certain destruction. So I want to say to you this morning what Mordecai said to Esther all those years ago. Who knows? But perhaps you've come to this place, this church, for such a time as this. I mean, he has. He's brought you to this place for a purpose. And that purpose is to expand the reach of his kingdom into this community. That's what we're called to do and be as his church. And that's what we are. This isn't my church. This isn't your church. This is his church. And God desires that all who are part of his church will live out their faith in such a way that through the ministries of his church, all people will come to know him as their Savior through his Son, Jesus. All people. And our responsibility as members of his church is to do everything that we can to build a strong and a vital and effective congregation that represents the welcoming arms of God. And I truly believe that the transformation that God is inviting us to bring onto our campus will put us in a much better place to do just that. And I tend to agree with what the prophet said in the Old Testament book of Isaiah. In Isaiah 54, this is what the prophet said. He said, enlarge your house, build an addition, spread out your home and spare no expense, for you will soon be bursting at the seams. Your descendants will occupy other nations and resettle the ruined cities. You know what? That is what God is calling us to do right now. He's inviting us to remove the barriers and to enlarge our house so that we can then position ourselves for effective ministry, not just today, but into the future. I mean, this isn't just about tomorrow. This is also about now. And that's what God has called us together to do. That's why you're here today for such a time as this. Over the last couple of weeks, I've shared with you some images that have really helped bring perspective, at least to me, for all that God has placed before us. The first of those images I want to show you is one I showed you 2 Sundays ago, or actually I showed you this one last Sunday. This is Evans Chapel United Methodist Church in Leona, Texas. And I show you this again because for me, this reminds me and represents to me the power of legacy. In that little church in Leona, Texas, my great uncle, Charlie Lamb, taught a boys' Sunday school class for 30 to 40 years. And out of that Sunday school class that he taught in that little church, 9 United Methodist ministers entered the ministry. I'm the grandson of one of those ministers that came out of that class. And I think about the legacy that Charlie Lamb left by being faithful to God's call on his life. That legacy is still being lived out today. And you know what, friends? You have an opportunity to leave a legacy today by the commitment that you make toward this capital campaign. Because years from now, people are going to bring their children onto this campus. They're going to put them in a nursery, or they're going to put them in a Sunday school class, and then they're going to go worship in one of our 2 worship centers. And then after worship, they're going to connect with other people who have worshiped in this place on that particular day in the gathering space that connects this building and the annex building. And they're going to have you to thank for what they're able to do on this campus. You truly do have an opportunity to leave a powerful legacy to people who will come on this campus someday, whose names you'll never know, whose faces you'll never see. The second image I want to share with you is one I shared with you a couple of weeks ago. It's a picture I took while on my way to church that morning, and this is the image. I share this one with you because it represents to me the power of our witness. Every day when I drive to church, this is what I see when I drive through that neighborhood that is currently being developed. And I look at that steeple and I was thinking about the birthday parties that are going to take place in the backyards of the houses in that neighborhood and the pictures that are going to be taken of the kids in those birthday parties. And there's a likelihood that steeple will be in the background of some of those pictures. I think about people who are going to walk out their front door and get in their car and drive down the streets of that neighborhood. And when they look in the direction of our campus, they're going to see that steeple. And we have, I believe, both the opportunity and the responsibility to show them what that steeple represents. And what that steeple represents is a congregation of warm-hearted, Jesus-loving people who believe to the core of their being that we really do have something valuable to offer to the people who live next door, as well as to the people who come onto our campus. And what we have to offer is grace. Grace through Jesus Christ. Grace that will awaken their faith and change their lives and secure their place in eternity. And I truly believe that the transformation of our campus that's going to take place as a result of this capital campaign will position our church to be stronger and to be more vital and to be more effective in ministry to the community surrounding our church, as well as to all who will come onto our campus. I truly believe that God has brought us all together for such a time as this, to join with other members of our church and make a financial commitment that will help this vision that God has placed before us become a reality. And as we told you last Sunday, we've gotten off to an incredible start. We told you last Sunday that at our advanced commitment event, 88 people committed to over $4.5 million over a 3-year period of time. That's $1.5 million more than we have ever raised in our largest ever capital campaign that came from the whole congregation. I'm going to tell you, that amount puts us well on our way to reaching the goal that God has placed before us. So here's the question I have for you today. What is God calling you to release today to help make his vision become a reality? What is God calling you to release today? Now, I want to share with you something that I believe is important for all of us. We can't all give equal gifts. We can't. I mean, some people can give $500,000. They have. Some people can give $100,000. Some people can give $3,000 over 3 years. I mean, we're all over the place on this because we're all blessed differently. Our resources are not the same. So God doesn't expect us to give equal gifts because we can't do that, but we can make equal sacrifice. And I believe that's what God is asking each of us to do today. It's why he's called you to be a part of this church for such a time as this. I think you'll agree with me that our church is situated in a world, and more specifically in a community where there are large numbers of lost and hurting people. I think you'll agree with me that there are people in every neighborhood that surrounds this church who need to know Jesus as Lord and Savior over their lives. There are families that need to know that there's a church in their neighborhood that cares about the struggles they're having. They need to know that there's a church near their house that cares about the spiritual well-being of every member of their family, mom, dad, and kids. There are people of all ages and stations in life in the neighborhoods that surround this church who need to know that there's a church in their neighborhood that has a place for them and cares for them. Now, it's true. It's true there are a lot of organizations in the Bryan College Station area that help people. But none of them come close to providing what we have the calling to provide, and that is Jesus Christ. I mean, there are a lot of organizations that care about people, but our church not only cares about people, more importantly, we care about their eternal destiny. I mean, there is nothing more important than what happens within the church. Nothing. And if you believe that people are lost without Jesus, if you believe that it takes more than simply being a good person in order to spend eternity with Jesus in heaven, then I think you'll agree with me that there is nothing more important for people to know than the message of the gospel of Jesus Christ. That is the only message that will heal the sickness of the human heart and soul. I mean, Jesus is the only one who can forgive our sins and who can remove our shame and who can heal our wounds, who can lead us to reconcile with our enemies, who can save our eternal souls and give us a second chance at life. Jesus is the only one who can do that. And that's the message that we at Christ United Methodist Church have been given to share with everybody who lives around us and with everyone who comes onto our campus in every way that we can. I share this with you to help you understand that the decisions that we're making today, decisions to transform our campus so that we can most effectively position ourselves to provide effective ministry to the people who live around us, I share this with you to say that the decisions that we're making are more important than any of us can fathom. You see, I truly believe that we have a responsibility to reach the children who live in the homes that are in the neighborhoods surrounding our church. And to reach them in such a way that they know that they have a place in this church where they can come and learn to sing the song, Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. I believe we have a responsibility to reach the teenagers who live in the community surrounding our church and help them realize that they are valued by God and that they have a place that they can come to in this church where they can be who they are, but at the same time be challenged to be all that God calls them to be. I believe we have a responsibility to reach the men and the women who live in the neighborhoods surrounding our church and help them know that there is in this church a place that they can come to where they can learn more about what it means to be a godly man and a godly woman who lives with integrity and with faith and conviction, and where they can come to know that there is a ministry to men and a ministry to women that each strive to meet the spiritual and emotional needs of each of them. You see, I believe we have a responsibility to reach the families in the communities that surround our church and help them know that they have in our church a place that cares for them and provides programs and ministries that will help them build strong, Jesus-centered families. I believe we have a responsibility to reach the empty nesters who live in the homes that surround our church and help them know that there is a place for them in our church where they can connect with other people who are on the same journey that they're on, who will help them live into that new normal that they experience after the kids have left the house. I believe we have a responsibility to reach the senior adults who live around our campus and let them know that there is a place for them in our church as well. And that as they move into those years of retirement, that we believe people never retire from living the Christian life, and that there are countless opportunities in our church for them to serve and to witness and to mentor and to live out their faith as God intended. We have a tremendous responsibility to the people around us. So I truly believe that it is for such a time as this that God has called you and me together to faithfully step into His vision for our church so that we can truly be the community of hope that He established us to be. And the question I ask of you today is, are you willing to take that step? Are you willing to take that step and help provide a place for people of all ages and stations in life where they can come to know Christ and come to walk that journey of faith with other believers and experience the fullness of life that is promised by our Savior Jesus? Will you take that step? I believe it will bless you if you do. And I believe it will bless the lives of people whose faces you'll never see and whose names you'll never know, but whose hearts will be with the Lord because of the commitment that you make today. Let's pray. Gracious God, I thank you.